Good morning, everybody. Woo! What a wonderful day. It's hump day, and I've made it to day 7 of my 7-day live stream challenge, where I challenge myself to go live 7 days straight talking about technology, network engineering, some Python, and I've made it here. And some of you guys have made it here with me. Thank you for joining me here today, this morning on show version live stream. How are you guys doing this morning? Let me know in the comments. If you're in a good mood, hit the like button. I'm in a good mood. We're gonna end this live stream, 7-day live stream, on a high note. But before we get started, we gotta sip that coffee. All right. I think it's going to be an excellent show. We're going to dive into Python and continue from yesterday, where I was working on a Juniper switch. We want to make some changes to our switch configuration using a script. It's going to be pretty bare bones script, but we'll see if we can get it working. But after 7 days, I ended up learning quite a bit about live streaming. It was a very good experience for me, although I did have to wake up pretty early to get ready for these live streams. And typically I get prepped the day before, trying to figure out a topic to talk about, and I just kind of got latched on to Python and DevOps, that kind of thing. And I wanted to give it a shot myself, and because I had made a goal to do more Python, I decided, hey, why don't I stick to that in the live stream? And then we could, in the future, do some videos where we touch upon different technologies. For now, it's been about a Juniper switch, but I will then integrate other things, maybe some actual labs, and then touch upon wireless. And so learning new technologies, getting back into Python, I think it's a great start for me. And hopefully for you, if you're also trying to learn Python, this is just my experience and my journey trying to figure things out. And typically about a day before, a couple hours before, and sometimes I wake up a little earlier to get ready for this and try to understand what I'm going to go through so it's not a complete mess. Let me know in the comments where you guys are coming from today. I want to thank you guys for joining me as I go on to this thing here. So we're going to continue from yesterday, recap from actually the last 2 days, where I have this Juniper switch here. And we started off with configuring Juniper, the interfaces, getting the gateway up, attaching a host to it, and having some VLANs attached to that, to the interface. And so I got a WLAN Pi. That's what that orange thing is on the top of the switch. It's actually being powered by the switch as well through the USB port. But I ended up getting it configured. I got a WLAN Pi connected there, and now we're able to connect to it. I was able to ping it. Richard, thanks for waking up so early. I don't know what time it is there, but thank you for joining me here. It's going to be an interesting event. So I've never really written made a change to a configuration file on a switch before using a Python script. And I thought it'd be pretty hard. I got used to writing a script where you can grab information, and we were able to do that yesterday, where we could get VLAN information. We were able to get login information off the switch, filter out the running config so we got only the data we wanted, and then use the for loop in order to iterate through that list to get an idea of what's going on, right? But let's get started here. And what we want to do is, I've got this blank slate. I erased everything from yesterday, and we'll start brand new. I've also got my switch here. It's here. I gotta move some of these windows. So I've got my switch here. Here it is, right? I'm consoled in. We can do a show configuration display set. So from yesterday, or from the yesterday and the day before, we've set up a user account. We enabled netconf, which is how we're getting to it. And so now we've got interfaces configured. We got our gateway, our virtual interface, and some VLANs. And German, thanks for joining me. Good evening to you. And thank you for joining me on another live webinar. Hope you're having a great dinner. Thanks for watching me as part of your dinner. Appreciate that. On this tab here, I've got a virtual environment going, which I've always been in as I've imported different libraries into it. I haven't deactivated it since. I've just kept my computer plugged in. And then we've got this demo file. So my end goal here is to log into this switch using netconf, the netconf user account, and then we are going to push a config to it. So I wanted to start easy with the host name. Changing the host name should be fairly easy, right? And then maybe we can try adding some VLANs. We'll see how that goes and go from there. Eric, good morning. Thank you for joining me here today. I definitely need a lot of coffee this morning because I stayed up kind of late where my kids wanted to play Minecraft, and then now I'm kind of hooked on Minecraft. So last night I was building a community, like we were making our own house in our Minecraft world. I have my own Minecraft server hosted on VMware, and so that's what my kids are playing with. And then I got hooked on it, started building stuff, and I didn't go to sleep early enough. So here I am trying to load up on coffee. What we're going to do is first begin by importing the libraries that we need. So like I have been doing the last couple of days, I have been using netconf client. And so we're going to import the manager module in order to make our connection, our netconf connection to our switch. One thing we do need for me to write configurations to this thing, and I was looking at, so there's my screen. I wasn't sharing my screen, but I've been trying to go through the documentation for netconf client, and for me, it hasn't been easy. I'm not used to reading this kind of documentation. And what I was really wanting to look at was, so this is the complete API documentation for netconf client. There's the web address here at the top. I wanted to look at these operations for editing. And so to me, this isn't very easy to read, right? We've got edit config, and this is a class. So this is like the whole RPC operation that goes on behind the scenes when you use netconf client. And I notice one thing here. So I've got a device handler that I'll put on there for Junos. And I did learn we need to add a timeout, or else you won't know what the heck's going on. Maybe it doesn't time out if something's not working. But there's this request here. And so we want to make a request to edit the config. And it does say that it can be specified as either a string or an element. Excuse me as I try to get these allergies out. And so we want to work with this element here, and it's using an element tree. I think this is built into Python. As I hover over this, it says in Python version 2.7. So I went over to GitHub, and I found, so this is the GitHub page for netconf client. They do have the operations and this edit.py file. And so I can see here they've like importing this library. We've got the netconf client. And this is where it starts to get a little more useful as I try to figure out, all right, what do I need to do in order to write a Python script to write a config. And so I spent some time yesterday in the afternoon trying to figure out what this means. So all I know is this is a class, and I don't even remember what a class is in Python, but I know it's like a set of operations contained in this class, because you can see that they define a function here called request. And so in this request, there's things that I notice like config, and it's on the candidate is the target of data store for the configuration. And so looking at this, target is the name of the configuration data store being edited. The config is a configuration which must be rooted in the config element. All right, so that's the interesting part to me. It can be specified either as a string or a class like element tree, which I said earlier. So I found that the GitHub page had some pretty good information. And so I wanted to know this config stuff. And I noticed they do things like this, like node equals, I think that says like new element. And then they do all these kinds of things. And then there's a sub element. And then I noticed this default operation, and then .text equals default operation if default operation. So it's kind of interesting. So it kind of pointed me in the right direction, where I was thinking, all right, so I need to, when it said it needed to be rooted, I think this is what it meant by it needed to be rooted here, because it's doing the edit config. So I wanted to see some examples, because I don't know, some of this stuff is so new to me. They do have examples, an example directory from the netconf client directory. And luckily enough, they got one for Juniper. All right, so the easiest thing I wanted to look at was edit config, standard. So let's look at that. It's importing these two libraries. That's how I figured out, okay, I need to import these two libraries. I'm going to make my connection with the manager to my switch. We have to lock the configuration. And then here's this rooting the config here. And then it goes into a sub element. So they're in the config, they're in configuration, they're modifying something under system and location and adding these values. So we're going to do that. Then you validate, here's the edit config. They put that into this variable where they go edit this configuration, and the config is root. So this is the config right here, this whole thing. Then they validate it. They do some comparisons. They do a commit, unlock your session because you've locked it, or unlock the lock you have on that configuration, and then close out the session. And then because this is a function, all that is contained under the function, and then they just call it here. They go connect and pass over the host parameters. So I'm not going to go that deep, but let's try to do this in Python. All right. So I started with importing the manager. All right, the client manager. We'll start there. I don't know if you guys can see that, so let me zoom in. I don't want to zoom in too much because then I can't. There you go. That's good. All right, so let's see here. So we've imported manager. We want to import those new element stuff. I don't even know what it's called. I tried to look it up, but couldn't find it. But it has to do with XML, and then we're going to import the new, I'm going to just call it new element, and also the sub element, because we're going to root it in the new element and then anything else contained under that. So what I'm looking for is, if we go back to my switch, and this is a neat command that I learned here. So if you do show configuration and then system hostname, gives you the host name, right? So there it is. So just remember that. That is my switch host name there. And then what's really useful for me in this configuration, if we do for the script, show system host name, and instead of where yesterday I was using display set, if we do display XML, it gives it to us in XML. So here's exactly what I would want to use. So I'm going to root the script in system, and the sub element is going to be hostname. So I believe that's how we're going to modify this switch. So just remember, I'll leave that config up there. This is the hostname. We want to change that. And start thinking of a host name. What host name should I give it? And so we'll wait until we get there. So now we need to first make our connection, write the content in order to make our connection. And so the other day I was doing with manager, because when you do that, it will automatically close out the session when it's done making its connection. Instead, I'm going to assign it to something easy like M for manager. That's what I'm calling it, M. And then do manager. So now we're using that module from netconf client, and we're going to make a connection. And in here, I'm just going to pass over the host details. So we've done this before. Remember, we made our IP for the switch. Oops, messed that up. And then there you go. Comma. We're using port 22. I didn't change that at all. Username is netconf. We created that yesterday. And password is my super strong password. And then I'm going to pass over device parameters. And this one's a little funky the way they do this. I'm going to pass over device parameters, and it's the name, and then colon within single quotes, and then Junos. That's what I'm working with, because I am going to use some Junos commands. And then one thing that I learned as I tried to do this yesterday is we need to add a timeout. You don't want to make the timeout too short, because sometimes it will take time to pull the config. So I started it off, I was using like the value of 1, and it was too short, because then I got an error where the script would say like, hey, I timed out. It didn't work. So I'll leave it to 60. And then because we're using a self-signed certificate on this switch, we're going to use host key _ verify and false. So that is if I do like let's just try something. M dot command, because M is making the connection. Then I'm going to pass over to the command, and I don't remember the command. Was there? Let's just try. I don't know. Show version. I don't know if that does anything. We'll try it. So I'll go over to my CLI, run that script, device params. I need an equals there. So this is how you typically troubleshoot. You got an error. It's saying invalid syntax. It's got a caret. It's saying in this line 9, where the caret is, I don't know what Python is saying. I don't know what that is. And you go here to line 9, and I'm missing an equal sign. I know that because everything else has an equal sign, because there's no such thing as the device params and then the curly bracket with all that content. So we'll save that again. Clear scroll back. Timeout 60 doesn't know what that is. Why? Oh, because it says invalid syntax here, and you would think, why is that an invalid syntax? Line 10, and notice like the color of this text here, it's not purple like these ones, because it's not actually containing a value, and it's because the line above on line 9, I have no comma at the end to indicate that next line there's more parameters. So you can see at the end here, look at the color of timeout. It believes it's like on the same line. It's part of that. So if I go to the end and hit comma, you can see now it's purple. It has a value of timeout or value of 60. Let's try it again. don't know if it's going to do anything. We'll see. Oh, it took something. So what I could do is go output, assign m command show version to output, and then print output. So what I'm doing here is actually passing this is part of netconf client, and I'm just going to pass a show version command as this connects to the switch. And then I'm going to assign that to put whatever that output is into this variable output and then print it out. Just playing around with Python right now. That's pretty good, right? So there's the output of show version. Pretty neat, right? Do you guys like that? That's cool. I like it. I mean, that's the first time I like try this stuff and then go, wow, it works. All right, so now let's actually get into some of the stuff we really wanted to do. We've got our connect there. So the first thing when we're modifying the configuration is we need to lock the configuration. So with that connection, that manager connect, there is a lock operation, right? So there's a function somewhere in here in the documentation. There is, I'll show you. I've been going through these GitHub pages. I think it's under operations. Here, lock.py. All right. So we can call this lock, allows the client to lock the configuration system of a device. So that's what I'm doing. And this is the code. This is this API, netconf client API, doing this for me, so I don't have to configure everything. I'm just calling it a lock. It's going to lock the configuration. Now, I wanted to do is change the host name, right? If you guys came up with a host name you want me to use, put it in the comments, and I'll pick one and use it. But remember earlier I said we had to root the configuration, right? So I had to look into doing that. And again, if we went back to the documentation, actually not this one, I have it here in a tab. We're doing something like this, right? So I did a search for sub element or sub underscore ELE, and I wanted to know how to root that. And so here's an example that I'm going to try to use. So we learned that we're trying to change the host name. And so what I want to do is we'll call this config. And what we'll do is root that with new ELE underscore ELE. And it said config here, but I'm going to do it in system, because that's where I want to change the host name. All right, so we'll do parentheses and a single quote, call it system. And then underneath that, we define the sub element. And the sub will be host name right here in this output. So we got to make sure we get that syntax correct. So host dash name. And this is what we want to change. So if we go back to here, I can see that in this example, they're adding a text to building under location with dot text and then equals. So I'm going to do the same. Hostname dot text equals. Did anyone come up with the host name, or shall I pick it? All right, I'll make it uppercase. Let's call it Thor. All right. So that is our config, right? So remember, back at my switch, the host name is sw-junos1. So now that we've got the config that we want to push up to this, we need to load configuration, which if you go back to the documentation, where can I find load? Can't seem to find it here. I know I saw it yesterday, and now I cannot find it. But Eric says pickaxe. All right, let's use pickaxe. I'll do it all uppercase so we can see it. All right. So the next thing we need to do is load the configuration. So with the connect, we're doing this all part of that connect there. We're going to do load underscore configuration. And I know I showed this to you guys, right? You guys saw this. Load. So part of the edit config loads. So we need to define like a config, right? So it needs to know what am I going to load to this candidate configuration. And so if you go back here, we're going to say the config is actually this guy, config. Okay, and so that's that. They do this validate, and so far I haven't figured out what validate really does. Maybe we can go back there and see it. It's not in here. There it is. Check if it is a valid default operation. I think that's what that is. Self-assert validate. Yeah. Let's add that. Validate. It's a function somewhere, so I know it's here. We can do a search at the top. Validate. Validate. Test validate config. All right, well, I'm guessing it's validating the configuration. Like a commit check? Kind of like, I don't know. I'll figure that out. So then we want to commit the configuration. And so I could do just a commit like that, but we wouldn't be able to see the RPC messages of what's happening. And so what we could do is actually assign that to a variable like commit config equals m.commit. And then underneath that, print out the output, what's returned, commit config. And I learned that they in the examples they said to string. So I think they're printing it as a string. Oh, I think we can get rid of that. Let's just see what happens. And then after you're done, so here we are now going to commit this configuration, this new host name. All right. After we're done, we have to unlock our session with m.unlock because we have locked it up here at line 14. We're going to unlock it on line 23. And then we're going to close out our session because we don't want it to be left open. We open that connection with m, right? It's making this connection with these parameters, but it's not automatically closing it. So we have to have a closed session. So will this work? Let's see. Remember, we've got a host name of sw-junos1. All right, I'm going in here, gonna hit the up arrow. Gonna see if it works. I hope so. I'm missing an argument. Sub element. What are we missing? Oh, you know what I didn't tell it? I didn't tell it what sub element it's part of. You can see here, line 16. It's saying this line here, it's missing a positional argument, a tag. I created a sub element and I'm saying I'm modifying host name, but this line doesn't know what the root is. So I have to actually put this guy in front of it, config, comma, and we're modifying host name. I believe that's what we need to do. So do you guys understand that part? We're rooting ourselves into system, right? That's the root, and I've assigned it to config. And since we're modifying the sub element host name, we actually need to define where it is host name is rooted in. And I'm saying config is where you're rooted in, which config is rooted in system. System is assigned to that. So that's what I'm passing down. So I'll save that configuration. We'll try this again. Let's hope it works. It's taken a while. So this is where maybe further on when I learn how to do Python, we do output of what's happening. All right, so we got a reply, an RPC reply message. That's good. That's the unique identifier. Here are the commit results. And it is a commit check success. So I think that's what the validate is. And after it committed, it was a success. All right, so now we've got a new DB revision here. That was the old one. Commit result, okay. All right, so now we go back to our console of the switch. Okay, I haven't hit anything yet, but do you guys think it will be pickaxe? If I hit enter, it should show the new host name, right? There it is, pickaxe. Eric, you've got your new switch. You've assigned it the host name of pickaxe. We have been successful in modifying that host name with this very bare bones script. And that to me makes me very happy. We're making some progress. I'm making some progress with scripting and using Python with netconf client to make a modification to the switch, which means we could do, we're getting closer to a lot more advanced capabilities, right? So now I understand how to make these changes. We could get more creative. Now we could clean this up and create some functions, but I want to know kind of the bare bones before I move on to functions, because functions would make this a lot more cleaner and make it reusable in different parts of code. But we've managed to do this in about 24 lines of modifying the host name. So I thought that was really neat, right? Don't you guys think that's good? If you like that, give me a like there on the video, because I thought that was a great thing. Okay, so now one thing I do want to make, all right, so I've got this, we created the host name. Let's do like a VLAN change, all right? We'll see if we can get this to work. Let's add a VLAN. Okay, so if I do show configuration VLANs and do display set, I've got those VLANs right there. Let's add, I don't know, VLAN 200. It doesn't exist. And let's give it a name. So if you guys have a name for a VLAN, let me know as I pull up some information, because we're going to modify our script. If I go back to the script, we need to change where it's rooted. So with this script, it's pretty simple, just trying to interact with the switch, and we could do things, maybe create a dashboard for somebody who doesn't know how to modify things on a switch, give them a dashboard and have an option for them to change a host name for a switch. I don't know. You can do something like that. But when we want to change a VLAN, we got to change where it's rooted. So we got to change pretty much this block of text right here. All right. So what I want to do is show configuration VLANs, and instead of display set, I'm going to do display XML. All right. So I think what we want to do is root ourselves. Do I do it here or here? I think we're going to root ourselves in VLANs, because that's the root. That's like the highest level under configuration. And then this would be a sub element. And these are sub elements of VLAN. So we want to create a name for a VLAN and give it a VLAN ID. So I know I want the VLAN ID 200. If there's a name you guys want to use for that VLAN, let me know. So now we want to do, we'll keep config. Actually, let's change it. You can call it anything. You can call it VLAN. New element VLANs. We have a sub element of VLAN, which that sub element, if you look back up at the output, is VLAN. So VLAN is a sub element of VLANs, right? So it's like we're going down this tree. So we'll say VLANs, but we're not making the change to that sub element, so we don't need everything after the close parentheses. And then we, wait, yeah, no, there's no S. VLANs. VLAN is a sub-element of VLANs, as you can see in this XML. Here's the root element, VLANs. VLAN is a sub-element of VLANs. And then we want to go further down with, I guess, we could give this, let me clean it up. VLANs, VLAN is a sub-element of VLANs, and then I'll give this a name of VLAN equals that. And then we can do like the name of the VLAN. So we'll say name equals sub-element of VLAN, and name, if we go back to the output, it's just name. So in single quotes, we'll do name, close parentheses, dot text. And if you remember, we do a equals, and we give it a name. So I'll give it a name of Richard, if he's still, Richard Elder, if you're still here. All right, so we've given the VLAN a name. I also want to give it the VLAN ID number. So we'll do VLAN underscore ID equals sub element. And this is a sub element of VLAN. Oh, Eric's got a, all right, Eric, you want to go a little bit creepy on this VLAN. All right. Sorry, Richard. We'll call it Creeper. This is a Creeper VLAN. And maybe we'll add 2 VLANs. I don't know how to do that. We'll see. So sub-element, the VLAN ID is a sub-element of VLAN, not name, right? Don't get that confused. And it's VLAN, valid, VLAN-ID dot text equals 666. So I wonder if we can add another VLAN. So yeah, I wonder how do you add multiple? That would be my question. I don't know. Let's try it, right? So don't forget that this load configuration, we had it config go to load config. Now it's changed to VLANs. So this is how errors happen in code. But we'll add another VLAN afterwards. Richard, let me know what VLAN number you want, but we'll add it. So let's verify. So we have these VLANs, VLAN 1, VLAN 140, VLAN 103, and VLAN 129. All right, so I want to add VLAN 666. So now if we go back here, we run the script, make sure I saved it, hit enter. So you can see how we can create functions for this, because now instead of having to modify individual pieces of lines of code, we can create a function where you can just define what those values are, and then the function will take those arguments and put them into the script. All right, so we have a success here. This is good. Again, here's the commit results. It did a commit check, and it's a commit success, and it closed out the session. All right, so let's go back to our console. And so if I clear the scroll back and do display set, there's our creeper VLAN. All we got to do is assign it to a switch port now. And so Richard wants to make a VLAN 157. So this is good practice. So now if you created a function that just, maybe a function that defines VLAN add, for example, you would have these components in here. So instead of creeper, we'll add Richard and make it VLAN 157. As you can see back in the console, we don't have VLAN 157 anywhere. So I can make this a little bit cleaner. Let's do match VLAN ID. There you go. Those are our VLANs right now. And we were successfully able to add creeper. So now we want to add Richard's VLAN. And he picked VLAN 157, VLAN ID 157. Is there any significance to that number, Richard? So I'll save this config. And we'll do it again. We've got a working script, guys, that modifies the Juniper switch. All right, Richard, you've got your VLAN here. We've got our commit results. The commit check was a success. The commit itself was a success, and it was able to end that RPC operation. So we go back here. You can see the results at the top before we made the change. And so now we're going to see if there's anything new. And there's our new VLAN again. So guys, we've successfully created a script here. Let me show you also the host name configuration. That's show configuration system host name. So there's a set system host name pickaxe. That's all I really wanted to do today, which is figure out how to modify the configuration. And so now the next step in doing this is probably creating some functions to clean this up a bit, add some comments, right? So we can do like, this is our passing arguments to make a connection to our switch. You could say this is to lock configuration. Configuration to add a VLAN. So I'm adding comments in here to make sure I know what all of this means when I look back at this configuration. So we're going loading our configuration to the candidate data store. Here we're committing our config. And this is going to print out the RPC reply. And then down here, we are unlocking our unlocking the configuration and closing the netconf session. So there you have it, guys. That's our script. And Richard said our 157 is part of 0157H7, which is E. coli identifier. Wow. Okay. You've got some history there, and that's actually yeah, Eric, that's a bit of trivia. 0157H7. Wow. That's our script, guys. Let me know what you think about that. Obviously, this is just part of my journey into Python and learning some network automation, some DevOps, that kind of thing. And then eventually I'm going to get into more advanced topics. But just so you know, I was able to pick this up just from doing some prep work yesterday. I was doing some research into how am I going to make some configuration changes to a switch. And all I had to do was look at the documentation from from netconf client. And also there was a blog post on codementor.io, which was pretty useful. There is an easier way to do this if you use PyEZ. Juniper's also got some libraries that they include in which you could try to make this a lot more cleaner. And so this one was by Packet, but they kind of go into how they create their script. And so here's some examples of what they're doing. And they go into detail about, they use like XPath. I didn't use that. I don't know how to do that. And they built out their config. But I mean, we were able to do this. So here's like kind of the clean way of doing it. They did some functions in which we could have done this as well, right? So if we did functions like this, we could have made the configuration a lot cleaner. But that's kind of the gist of what I'm trying to do here is look at the documentation, try to figure it out. And parts of that of the documentation on netconf client didn't quite make sense to me. So when I was doing some research, I came across codementor.io, in which they kind of define how they're making their connections to the Juniper switch and using netconf. And so that's the configuration. I'll see if I can post this somewhere online, so maybe on GitHub, so you guys can see the simplicity of a basic connection without all the fancy functions and all that. This is just a really basic configuration. I'll put it on GitHub just so I can keep track of my progression with Python and how I'm making connections. But this example you could do with any other network device. I just decided to stick with Juniper on this one as part of also learning Juniper. So just a couple days ago, I just started learning how to configure Juniper from scratch, and from there enabled netconf. And now instead of making changes directly in the CLI, I'm making changes in a script. So I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. I hope you learned something, because I sure did. I learned how to make configuration changes, talked about rooting your config with these elements and learning where to find these elements within the CLI. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. You'll get a notification when I go live or when a new video gets published. And I will be publishing videos about network engineering in general, so across all different topics, from certification studies to topics like this, and also wireless here and there. And so moving forward, I'm not going to do this every day. I did a 7-day challenge to myself to go live every day for 7 days. It's worked pretty well for me, but in this quarantine, I do want to kind of sleep in a little. I've been waking up at 6 a.m. to prep for these live streams, but I will do a regular live maybe once a week. I still haven't determined what that's going to look like yet, but I will post more videos regularly about topics like this, and also show what I've been learning about Python and interfacing with network devices, so you can kind of see how I'm learning Python. Maybe you could learn with me as well. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Let me know also in the comments what you think, if you have any tips. But that's all I have for you guys. I want to thank you for joining me here on this live stream. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you guys. Thank you, Jossie. Thank you for joining me.